All right, let's talk about White Lotus Season 3. I finished it and figured, well, why not make a video about it? Someone had suggested make a review on Severance, but I kind of just didn't have that much, I feel like, to add to that conversation. I feel like people got a lot more in-depth with that than I did and just didn't feel the need to, but I don't know. I just finished White Lotus. I had a lot of fun with Season 3, and I want to talk about it, so that's what I'm going to do here. I will mention, I think I just have to get into spoilers with this whole video. I don't think I can talk about this without spoiling Season 3. I will mention just, it's good. Watch it. If you haven't watched White Lotus at all, haven't watched this season, definitely check it out. It is worth the watch, in my opinion. But yeah, let's get into it, as this is another, in my opinion, very strong season. I actually think I like this better than Season 2, although I would still say Season 1 was my favorite. Like every season of White Lotus, there seems to be a very specific theme, or maybe not, I shouldn't say very specific, but there seem to be general themes that go throughout the entirety of the season. And this one, with it taking place in Thailand, was definitely about I think a lot of it was about desires and maybe not going after the things that you want and focusing on what you have, and essentially focusing on not trying to have anything as well. It's in many ways about the dangers that desires can bring, and I actually think that throughout every single character's arc, that's what it had, was the characters that came out looking okay were usually the ones that realize that they don't need their desires that they have, and the characters that ended up not coming out too well were the ones that could not get past that. This might actually be best exemplified by the minor character of Sam Rockwell, who shows up for a bit, has kind of a cameo in this, a little bit more than than a cameo, but a little bit less than a full, a full character in this season. But obviously he has these kind of intense desires to the point where he has to go clean sober to, really kind of achieve his happiness. But then he gets into his desires and things get, very unique. We can just say that. But also, this, I think, goes for everybody. For the character of Tim and really his entire family, I think that this is another situation that I would say is really about desires, and this is more about what they have that they maybe don't necessarily need, focusing on what you want versus what you need. So Tim's character in this is the father of a family who is here on vacation, and he finds out very early on that due to a sort of shady business deal that never really gets into too much detail, he is going to essentially lose everything that he has, probably go to jail for a little bit of time. Not something that's going to end his life, but is essentially, at least the reading of it, is he's going to start living like a normal person instead of like a very rich person. Throughout the series, Tim is struggling with how he's going to handle this and considers killing his family and himself, so he never has to deal with the horrible things that they will all have to go through, as there is, it's usually played for laughs, but he goes through each one of his family members often and is saying things, such as like, do you think we'd be okay without money? And they kind of, one by one, with the exception of one of his sons, Lockie, say, oh no, it'd be disastrous to have no money. I wouldn't even want to live without my, the luxuries that we have. Ultimately, Tim decides to not go through with the murder-suicide thing. However, due to a blender which did not get cleaned, which, by the way, Lucky, at least rinse it out. Like, I get you're a young guy, you don't necessarily clean everything, but you gotta at least rinse that out. But anyway, he decides not to, and ultimately accidentally poisons himself. Tim tried to kill his family, went back on it, decided not to, but then Lockie ends up accidentally taking the poison anyway. But when Tim saw Lockie struggling, realized in that moment that he didn't care about any of the luxuries that he had. He only cared about his family, and when Lockie turned out to not actually be dead, he couldn't really care less at that point about the harsh realities he was going to have to tell his family, realizing that there are more important things. Unfortunately, while that was a happy ending, it did not quite go that way for some other characters. I should mention, these are just my interpretations of it, my analysis, I suppose, of this season. Feel free to, if you disagree, let me know why in the comments below, or just tell me your interpretations, because ultimately, it is subjective, and there might not necessarily be a right answer here. But two people who did not quite have the realization of what is important is Walton Goggins' character as Rick, and also Chelsea, as they both definitely had their desires that ultimately were the end of them. Chelsea, who wanted to be with Rick, despite the fact that Rick clearly not as affectionate towards Chelsea, And meanwhile, Rick was obsessed with this man who he had believed to be his father, eventually finds out is his father, but because of that obsession, it ends up causing him to lose what he cares about most, Chelsea, where you see in that moment when Chelsea got shot, he could kind of fully realize that he had made the wrong decision and he should have just accepted and appreciated what he actually had. The desire thing also took shape in other ways, with you had the security guard who wanting to impress a woman near him, Mook. He ends up ultimately deciding to shoot and kill Walter Goggins' character, Rick. Again, having a desire and kind of letting that, have him go to become a murderer because of his desire of what he wanted, trying to impress Mook. And one of the most heartbreaking examples of this was Belinda. Belinda, who was a fan favorite from season 1, someone who was promised to have money to start up her own spa business. Ultimately, this time, gets the money to do it, but decides to kind of become what she once was, become what she hated, and not give it to a man that she had met there, who there was some talk of potentially them going into a business together. Essentially, her desires led her to become what she hated. And one of the most interesting storylines throughout this was the three women, with Lori, played by Carrie Coon, kind of at the center of all of this. She's a woman who, it's kind of set up as she is there with her friends, but you can clearly tell that the other friends, at least on the surface, while they have their own issues, do have more going on than what Lori has. Lori is the one who is single. She doesn't have as much money as the other two do, and that's essentially what's kind of was at the root of a lot of her struggles early on this season. The three women in general all would sometimes, they would be very nice to each other's face, but there's a lot of phony compliments towards each other, and behind their backs, they would often be a lot more harsh. But ultimately, the conclusion Lori comes to is that part of why she is being harsh is her own insecurities, her own insecurities about where she's at in life. And once she finally is willing to admit that, she, in my opinion, gives her first real compliments of the entire series in that final moment, which their storyline kind of wrapped up earlier than a lot of the other storylines did, interestingly enough, but that was my interpretation of that and their whole role in all of this. But ultimately, I found this to, again, be a really entertaining season of seeing how all these characters, went with their arcs, and there's some characters that I didn't even mention. There's the Chloe character with, Greg/Gary in the mix as well, which was, again, very fun. Also, I have to talk about just the family a little bit more. I talked about the character of Tim, but, the whole, the Patrick Schwarzenegger, who was fantastic, doing wonders for Nepo babies across the board with showing that, hey, you could be a Nepo baby and be a good actor as well. But the whole family was really good as well. I thought that they were all very fun. One other thing of going with the desires thing and the dangers that it can, come with. If you think about Lockie, and the reason why he almost died was because he was trying to drink a protein shake to essentially be more like his older brother, which is, his older brother seems to be on the pathway to being less like himself with reading those books towards the end and actually reading them. Even after he's on their way back, he's still reading them. So there seems to be at least some effort to take a step forward, because definitely he was not the he did a great job. I think it was a great character of being a very unlikable guy. But yeah, well, honestly, there's plenty more I could get to. Those are kind of my theories of the main storylines, my feelings of the main storylines. It's another season that I just really enjoyed, and I really enjoyed this type of series in that I do like the murder mystery element of it, but I like that it is more of a, almost feels like an indie drama for an entire, show, and then just has the certain big budget moments because it is a very popular show, which I find very, very fun. So ultimately, yeah, very big fan of this this season. I don't know. I'll give it maybe I'm in between like an 8 and a 9. I'll give it an 8 for now. We'll see how I sit on it. But yeah, 8 out of 10 for me so far with this show. Let me know in the comments below. What do you think? Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.